Does stress factor in your life? Stress is the opposite of homeostasis, the body and mind's natural state of balance. It has been known for some time that you can literally die from stress. As individuals, we have all found a personal rhythm of life. It may be more focused or more relaxed depending on our choices, which turn into habits. After months and years, habits turn into physical pathways in the brain, and then we can be programmed by our own past choices. If you feel that time is working against you, this is your own psychological conditioning coming back to haunt you. At work, for example, your mind and body are participating in whether you create a deadline anxiety, pressure and stress in yourself and others. The whole process is a feedback loop that keeps repeating itself. With repetition comes damage to the system, beginning in small ways almost no one notices. For example, being stressed typically triggers low-grade inflammation in many locations inside the body. Acute inflammation is noticeable through obvious symptoms like pain, swelling, skin reddening and fever, as when you catch a cold or worse, the flu. Chronic low-grade inflammation has no obvious symptoms. And yet, we now know that most of lifestyle disorders that affect people later on in life, including certain kinds of cancers, infections and weaker immune systems, have ties to inflammation. Thus, the effects of stress you experience today is linked to the effects of stress accumulating over the span of years, decades and a lifetime. Conditions like Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, along with heart disease and high blood pressure, should be minimised by securing a lifetime of wellness. And we can do this by attending to wellness every day, long before the symptoms even appear. It's important to break the habits that keep the feedback loop of stress going. Too often we talk about stress reduction without acting. And the more we put off making changes, the more entrenched we become in a stressful life. We work too hard, perhaps take the office home with us, cut our sleep short and ignore simple physical remedies for stress, like walking or getting out in nature and allowing time for yoga and meditation. Our dysfunctional time habits are the result of unconscious beliefs and behaviours, and to undo them we must first become aware of them. We break free of past conditioning by living in the present moment. You will no doubt have heard of the fight or flight response. What happens if you activate this response? Our heart would start beating faster, we would breathe deeper, take in more oxygen, our pupils would dilate to let in more light. Our digestive system would be put on hold, as our blood supply is diverted to our arms and legs so that we can run or fight. Our sweat glands would start to perspire to cool off our body. Our minds would become hyper alert and our adrenal glands would be pumping out adrenaline, noradrenaline and cortisone to rev up our system to deal with a stressful situation. So this is the fight or flight response. And when we lived in a predator-rich environment, it was necessary for survival, where we had to decide how to deal with an immediate threat. Do we run for our lives or find the nearest weapon and stay and fight, depending on whether we thought we could win or not? The problem is that this is one of the most deeply wired survival mechanisms that we still have, and we continue to activate this fight or flight response many times throughout our day and throughout our lives. So that if I'm driving to work or yoga, I'm going a little over the speed limit perhaps, and then in the rear view mirror I see blue flashing lights of a police car. I instantly activate my fight or flight response. My heart starts beating faster, I start sweating, my pupils dilate, my stomach goes into a cramp because I'm taking all the blood supply away. But what do? I usually don't run and I usually don't fight. I pull over to the side of the road, put this big smile on my face and come up with a story or an excuse to see if I can talk my way out of the situation. But my body has just activated a response that I had to suppress because it was just an overreaction to the situation. But we do this a lot, many times a day. We do it when we get cut up in traffic or someone jumps into a parking space we have been waiting for, or in the supermarket when someone has overflowing basket in the 10 items or less line. The child gets a bad school report, and every little stressor activates at some level the fight or flight response. The accumulation of these inappropriately activated stress responses may have a lot to do with our wear and tear on our physiology, which are responsible for many of the common illnesses we are facing today, like high blood pressure, heart disease, insomnia, anxiety, depression, These are all reflections of exhaustion of the system due to this continuous, frequent activation of the stress response. It is also understood that not only is it the nervous system that is activated when we are facing a challenging event in our lives, but also our endocrine system. So our hormones are intimately involved in the process of how we regulate homeostasis balance in our lives. Nowadays, it is also understood that there is a direct linkage between our nervous system and our immune system. So we can affect our immune system through our nervous system, particularly our sympathetic or stress nervous system. We can affect our nervous system through our endocrine system and through our hormones. If we have stress in the mind, the brain communicates that stress to its deep centre called the hypothalamus, which is like the conductor of our responses. It has influence directly on the pituitary gland, which controls the hormonal system. It has a direct input to the sympathetic nervous system, which controls our stress response. So we interpret an experience and we communicate that experience to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus then communicates that to the pituitary gland, to the nervous system. The pituitary gland then may cause the adrenal gland to release cortisol. The nervous system may cause the inner part of the adrenal gland to release adrenaline. Both of these chemicals have a direct effect on our immune cells, and then the immune cells feed back the information. It's amazing how quickly this communication network occurs. It's been shown that if you give a child immunisation to, say, chickenpox, within a few minutes you can see the changes in the brain of that child, even before you can see any type of changes in the blood. As soon as there is a change in the environment, the information is transmitted quickly to the brain, which brings its attention to organise the appropriate response. The brain communicates by way of the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, to the sympathetic nervous system, and our immune cells, which is feeding back information continuously to the nervous system, is an ongoing conversation. So that's the basic science, and there has been a lot of scientific studies that followed on from this, which led to the conclusion that stress has a lot to do with our ability to fight off infection. There was a study done in America where you take a person and wake them up at 3 a.m. and you keep them up for the rest of the day. And within an hour you will see changes in the natural killer cells, so they will be less effective in fighting off infection. If the next night they get a full night's sleep, by the following morning they will have recovered again. Things happen that quickly. So we can just imagine how when someone is under stress, they are overloaded at work, or worried they won't get all the tasks completed in time, or they're worried they will lose their job, or their relationship is about to break up, and they're not sleeping that well at night. Almost instantly your susceptibility to fight off illness becomes less. Studies have showed further another way to decrease natural killer cells is through touch. If you deprive someone of touch for a period of several days, their natural killer cells will begin to function less effectively. You can correct that very rapidly through something as simple as massage. And there have been studies about how common illnesses are in the elderly population, and whether the reduction in the immune function is actually a tactile deficiency syndrome, because they are simply not hugged or touched enough. The connections are very rapid and can give us a lot of confidence in some of the mind-body approaches outlined in this course. Most studies suggest that losing a spouse can be one of the most stressful experiences that you can experience, and it's quite clear there is an abrupt shift in the immune function at the time the spouse dies. If you have been caring for someone with an illness, you most likely will have already been experiencing a degradation in your immune function, as caring for someone can be very stressful. But with a death, there can be a step change, an abrupt deterioration in that function. And it seems to correlate with the depth of depression in grieving, so that people that can get back on with their lives after an appropriate period of grief will show a recovery with their immune system. But people who are unable to get over the loss will be increasingly susceptible to illness as time goes by. And studies have linked this to an increased risk of developing heart disease, cancer and infectious diseases. So it's really something that can have a lasting effect if we don't take action to re-establish balance. How could we explain the possibility of someone getting cancer soon after someone close to them died? Well, it goes back to the same model. Stress, which we experience in our mind, it's an interpretation. It causes changes in our nervous system, changes in our hormonal structure, changes in the hormones that influence our immune cells. And if the immune cells get lazy, the cancer cell arises. We experience about 10,000 potentially mutating hits to our genetic code every day through free radical formation from toxins in the environment, from foods that we eat, cigarette smoke, etc. So our ability to survive without serious illness is much dependent upon our immune cells promptly recognising and sending out the message, then quickly repairing damage to our cell. If we are under a state of chronic stress, our minds are sending out these negative messages. Our immune cells are not capable of responding properly and makes us very susceptible to a deterioration in our environment. And if death wasn't bad enough, divorce seems to have an even worse impact on our immune systems, even without considering the further complications that may result from self-medication to help alleviate stress from things like drugs, alcohol or overeating.